A lot of what I've said about poetry so far has been about demystifying it, learning to trust our intuitions and common sense, and slowly building up a relationship with the words on the page. Today, I want to give you the first of 3 simple tools that you can use that will very often help to give you a starting point when you approach a poem. You may sometimes come across the idea that we should empty our mind, make it a blank, and approach the poem with no preconceived ideas or expectations. But I'm not going to say that. Why not? Well, for one thing, it's almost impossible to do that. Everything we've experienced in our lives so far shapes whatever comes next. For example, if I say I'm going to tell you a story, you immediately have expectations. They don't have to be very complicated expectations, they can be quite simple. For example, you know that stories have a beginning and a middle and an end. So before you start to listen to the story, you expect it to have those things. You know that stories take place in a setting, so before you begin listening, you'll be wondering what setting the story will be in. Will it be in wartime or peace, in the city or the countryside, in the past or the present or the future? In the real world as we know it, or in an imaginary world? And so on. And you know that stories have characters, so again you'll have the expectation that the story you're about to listen to will also have characters. You'll expect the beginning of the story to give some kind of setting and introduce these characters. Then you'll expect the characters to move through a variety of settings and do various things, or things will happen to them, and you'll expect to find out about those things in the main body of the story. And you'll expect that the characters, or some of the characters, will change during the course of the story, so by the end they'll be different in some way from the way they were at the beginning. And those are just some of the things you probably expect when you begin reading or listening to a story. You may not always get what you expect. The writer might play around a bit and not give you everything you expect in quite the way you expected it. For example, the story may begin with a lot of action and very little context, leaving you confused about what's going on. Now, if it's a good writer, that'll probably make you feel curious, and so you'll want to read more and find out what's happening. But you have these expectations. Quite likely you aren't even conscious of them, but they're there. Before the story even begins, your mind will be preparing itself to notice certain things. So what about poetry? Well, again, we're bound to have certain expectations. Unfortunately, as I've said before, our expectations are often negative. We might think it's going to be difficult or boring or not really connected to our lives or something like that. What I want to do today is set up some positive expectations, tools, if you like, that will help us to approach poetry. This is the first of 3 that I'll be talking about. Now, these are not the only tools that we can use, and they may not always be the right tools for every poem. But if we carry them in our mind, they'll probably help us to get at least a basic grasp of what the poem is about. So, here it is. Here's the first tool. A poem is a picture, or a series of pictures. You've probably heard that poems contain imagery. And what is imagery? Imagery is basically pictures. So, if a poem is a picture, or a series of pictures, what do you see? That may seem like a very simple thing, and so it is, but it's surprising how many people read or listen to a poem and don't actually see anything at all. Or if they do see something, they don't focus clearly on it and visualize it in their minds. This is a rather wonderful thing about poetry. We all visualize the imagery in a poem slightly differently. I mean, take a look at these lines from Matthew Arnold's poem Dover Beach. The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand, glimmering and vast, out in the tranquil bay. If we close our eyes and imagine the picture those words call to mind, we'll all see it a little bit differently. When we study language, especially if it's a foreign language, the main question we ask is, what does it mean? But when we study literature, and particularly poetry, the main question is, what does it mean to me? We all make our own relationship with the text because we all see it in a different way. And every way can be right. Of course, that doesn't mean that all ways are right, and there are limits. If someone reads those lines and says they see an elephant sitting in a bus eating ice cream, then clearly there's something wrong. We need to be able to support our visualization by showing which words and expressions in the text call that picture to mind. So, although our pictures may be different, they'll all include, well, in this case, the sea and the moon and the cliffs of England and so on. Your cliffs may go straight down into the sea, while another person's cliffs may go down to a beach. Both pictures are possible because, well, so far at least, there's nothing in the poem to tell us which of those is correct. As we read on, we may find we need to modify our picture a bit, but basically, there are different ways of looking at it, and they can all be right. Similarly, the French coast and the cliffs of England, well, they should both be part of the picture, but how should we imagine them? Is the poet on a boat in between these two places, seeing them equally distant in opposite directions? Or is the poet on the land? And if so, which land? England or France? Well, the big hint here would be the title of the poem, of course, Dover Beach. That should make it obvious, but it's surprising how easily people forget the title when reading a poem. And of course, it's possible that you've never heard of Dover and you don't know whether it's in England or in France. You might need to look at a map to sort that out. Do whatever research you need to in order to help you to see the poem, to see the images that the poet is describing. Okay, so I'm sure you already had the idea that poems contain imagery, but I'd like you to work with that idea in a practical way. Choose a poem, any poem, and just say, okay, I know poetry contains images, and the images are pictures, so I should be able to see those pictures in my mind. Read the poem and think about what you see, how you envisage it. Try to visualize it in as much detail as you can. I'll be coming back to this idea of imagery later on, but before that, I'll introduce the second and third tools that you can use to help you get a sense of what's going on when you read a poem. So, goodbye for now, and I look forward to seeing you next time.